Chris?
Chris, welcome. Where are you from?
Kitchener.
What company or school do you go to?
Conestoga.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
Welcome. Very glad to have students out. Okay. Anyone else new? Nope. All right. My name is Lori Lalonde. I'm the user group of this. Or I'm the leader of this user group. I'm not the user group. I'm the leader of the user group.
That's right.
It's a long night. Okay. So, welcome to this session. Tom, next.
Okay. Oh,
Really? You can't
Uh-oh.
go next?
I
Like maybe,
cannot.
maybe mouse click?
What do you expect it to be?
No, maybe click.
Dude.
Okay, forget it.
Just picture it all.
Okay, thanks to our sponsors. Xamarin's a major sponsor of ours, and Code Magazine and Pluralsight. Next. You can always go online and get a free t-shirt from Xamarin if you download this project and comment our code, and there may also be a free monkey in there. So then you run the app, you add the shirt to the store, you check out, and then you get your free t-shirt within a few weeks. What are you doing?
I was just kind of curious why it was. Anyway,
This is not the time to debug.
all right.
Okay, definitely tweet, if you tweet about us, use our hashtag CTTDNUG so that we can see what you're saying about us, what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. Rate the meetup, same thing, please just take a minute after the meetup's done and rate us from 1 to 5 stars, tell us how you liked it, if you want to include comments. It helps us shape future sessions. And we have a job board. Sometimes people post jobs on there, or if you know of job postings, you can add them on there for free. Anybody can add a job posting. So just do that. We're always looking for sponsors. Next. This weekend's our Windows 10 Dev Camp. It's a full day camp. We have about 18 people registered now. Atlee Hunter, Andre Marukovich, and myself are going to be teaching everyone how to develop for Windows 10. We're going to be giving away Raspberry Pi 2 starter kit, Loot Crate, Infragistics license, Pluralsight licenses, Flare license. So it should be a good time. I have Subway sandwiches on order for lunch and Tim Hortons on order for breakfast. So it should be good. Yeah, it's going to be here. It's going to be in not in this room, but in the room down there. It's meeting room D and E. They're combined, so they're opening up the space. So we're going to have a really nice big room for that. All right, so our upcoming sessions, we have lightning rounds at the end of the month. That's at the Country House Community Library. And Windows 10 IoT on the Raspberry Pi, which will be here in December. That'll be our last session before the winter break, and then we will resume in January.
Oh, Blair from Monkey Show. Okay.
Yeah. London.net developers have a session coming up on developing for Windows 10 as well in early December if you're interested. Next.
Well, I'd be pushing that to November.
Okay. And Xamarin Evolve, that's coming up in April. I'm registered. I'm going to totally be there. So if you plan on going, let me know. We can hang out.
I'm working there. I'm getting actually paid to be there.
Yes.
Sweet.
Well, we're going to be hanging out, maybe. Or you might be too busy to hang out. We'll see. Yes. So Tom is joining Xamarin, so that'll be awesome.
Yep.
We'll have an inside person on there.
That's right. Inside.
Next.
Inside
Okay,
the-
there's some ladies groups in the area. Definitely check those out. And kids groups as well. And without further ado, Todd,
All right.
take it away.
Let's rock this.
Until Lori gets the rest of the people that are late.
Hey, don't point out the people that are late.
Sorry, why not?
Because that's the fun thing to do.
Just food and drinks in the back.
Okay, so like Lori said, my name is Sean Walker.
I'm a Microsoft MVP and also a Xamarin MVP. Not sure if I'm going to be able to keep that. I should be able to because just recently Xamarin has brought me on board as a contractor to work with them. If you want to reach me, you can get a hold of me at Twitter at TinyToot, and the URL is my blog. So I post blog articles on Xamarin and mobile apps or whatever else that catches my fancy. A little bit more about me. So, like I said, I'm a Windows platform developer. Been there this past year, hopefully going to get renewed. I've been in the developer space for the past 15 years. I've pretty much done it all from Windows Forms to web. Now moving into the mobile space and kind of enjoying that right now. So, for the ado, let's start talking about iOS development using Xamarin. So, question, who here is a iOS developer? Okay, all right. just get an idea of how much I should talk about. Who here have used Xamarin? Okay, a few of you, okay, great. Okay, so what I'm gonna tackle is basically I'm gonna define the problem that Xamarin kind of addresses, talk a little bit how it works. We'll talk a little bit about the development. So this is gonna be kind of like a nice intro to it. I welcome questions throughout the whole session. We'll try to keep this quick. And I'll talk a little bit about the iOS application lifecycle as well, so we'll touch on a few things there. And then we'll get into the demo app. Okay, so let's define the problem. So the problem we're trying to address here is the idea of the different silos that we have. So if you are with a company and you want to produce apps for iOS, Android, and Windows, typically what most companies have to do is basically hire separate teams to kind of build those apps, okay? So the story or what Xamarin tries to do is, if you are a C# developer, their whole technology revolves around you leveraging your C# your skills basically, and to be able to kind of produce native apps for both iOS and Android. So the idea being is, I can have the same code base using the same knowledge that I have and transfer that over to build those mobile apps for each of the platforms. So that's the idea here, is to kind of leverage your knowledge and basically do some code sharing across each of the platforms. Of course, you can, there's other technologies out there. There's Cordova, which is the web-based tool that you can use to kind of produce apps. The difficulties there, if you are a web developer, you probably already know this, is that not all the web browsers support all the web features. And that's even doubly so inside the mobile space. So if you have a few pain points that you've gone through, this may not necessarily address some of the things you're trying to get at. If you have a very simple application, this might be a route you want to take. But if you want to get a little bit more advanced, Xamarin might be actually the tool to kind of leverage here. And the other advantage, again, is you're compiling natively. So basically, I'm taking my C# code and actually compiling a native app into those platforms. Whereas here, I'm running it through a browser. So there's going to be some issues with the speed of the application. I talked a little bit about this before. So here is the idea is you have your common backspace of all your C# code. And the only difference that we've got is the UI. Of course, as you all know, the experiences are important. So in this case here, what you want to do is you want to basically have a unique experience on each of the platforms. So the nice thing about, again, Xamarin is it provides designers for each of the platforms. So I have the iOS storyboard designer built into Xamarin Studio, and I also have the Android designer as well. So the nice thing, again, is you're not flipping back and forth between tools to kind of get your work. So I don't know if you get into what they call the workflow. If you have to change focus, it takes a while to kind of get back into that workflow. Well, with Xamarin, you can kind of stay focused on your task within the same tool. The other nice thing that I haven't really touched on is you can also leverage Visual Studio. We'll kind of talk a little bit about that later on as I get into the tools. Okay, so how does Xamarin work? And I talked about this before. So on iOS, we have ahead of time compilation. In Android, we have just in time. We're not going to get to Android in this talk, but basically what it is I have my Mac here. I'm using the Mac because it's easier to kind of do demos, but I also run a virtual Windows 10 setup. Okay, so what happens here is I have a build server set up to kind of interface the Mac Xcode to my development environment, either in Xamarin Studio or Visual Studio. And the reason why that is because of licensing. Apple requires you to have an Apple device to do the compiling. That's the restriction there. So unfortunately, you're going to have, if you want to produce iOS apps, you're going to need a Mac. You can, so I've got the MacBook Air, I know Laura's got the Pro MacBook. They've got those smaller devices, and I'm trying to remember the name.
Mac Mini.
Mac Mini, thank you. So you can buy one of those for roughly between 600 to 800. Doesn't have to be very, high-powered one. All you need to do is compile it, so you don't really need to even have a monitor on it, but basically it has to be on the network. You set up what they call a build server on it, so basically what it is just a little server app that you interface with your Xamarin Studio or Visual Studio. I'll kind of show you how that kind of works. The nice thing about this, and I touched on it before, is basically you can leverage your APIs that you're familiar with on the .NET stack within your applications. So that's the nice thing there. So you have all these that you're familiar with. You can kind of leverage that inside your apps for both iOS and Android. And again, you can use the same APIs for Windows storage devices for some of your API calls. And on the Mac side, some of these you might not be familiar with, but we also have these as well. So basically what Xamarin has done is they put wrappers around the APIs. Okay, so you can kind of make calls to those APIs to kind of leverage those features within your app. I'll go into some of that too. This particular demo that I've got actually uses the built-in social Twitter API. So I'll talk a little bit about that when I get into the demo. Same thing for the Android as well. Again, this has a wrapper around the Android APIs that kind of use for you to kind of leverage those within your application. The nice thing about this is, even though it's a small group, they can basically, usually within a week to a day, roll out the updates. So if Apple or Google releases a update to their SDKs, the team usually has the beta ready to go next day on release. So that's pretty good. So the message they want to kind of send to you is whatever you can do in Object-C or Java, you can do in Xamarin or Visual Studio. The other thing that I haven't brought into the demo slide is they recently purchased a company called RoboVM. Okay, they've pretty much do the same thing that Xamarin does, but on the Java side. Okay, and with that company, they basically bought that technology. So the idea is, if you're a Java developer, you can kind of do the same things. So they're bringing that into the technology as well. So hopefully, we'll hear a little bit more about that. And this is actually updated now. They actually do support iOS 9.1. So typically, they either have it the week of or the day after. And of course, if you are interested in the Googleware, Androidware, the other one that I haven't put up here yet is the Apple TV and the iWatch, or the watch that Apple produces. Yeah, they have APIs for that too. So basically, you have a designer inside to kind of produce your apps on there as well. So this is an application that was built by someone to basically do circuit board stats. So basically, this person was able to kind of get up to 90% code reuse. So they were able to kind of leverage that across each of these platforms. The only big difference, of course, is the unique user interface. And that's understandable because each mobile platform has their own different UI navigation patterns. So these are the stores that you have available to you. So you have access to all the stores. So whatever you produce in Xamarin, you can publish to these stores and be accepted without any problems. And this has been updated. If you are using Visual Studio 2015, Xamarin is actually baked in the install now. Okay. So when you do a custom install, if you go into the mobile options, there's going to be an option to install Xamarin. So you can now, as part of the install for Visual Studio 2015, install Xamarin as well. The only you require is that you sign up for a license. So you can get the trial license to kind of try this out. The gotcha with that is basically there's a limitation to the size of the application you produce.
Good evening. I hope you are enjoying your visit to the Kitchener Public Library.
I am.
Please join us in about 5 minutes for a quartet performance in the Reading Lounge, which will commemorate Remembrance Day through song. The performance titled Slide by Slide will take place from 6:30 to 7:30 this evening. Thank you.
Awesome.
Tom, question.
Yeah.
Is that Xamarin option available in the community edition of Visual Studio, or do you have to get Enterprise?
No, it's actually available in community as well. Yeah, I had several people ask me about that question. And the other question they follow up is, do you have a license to go away? The answer is no. I do not. Okay, there we go. That's a little better. Move around too much space. So this is an example of basically the difference of the different UI patterns, and basically what they've got is they've got Visual Studio background doing the development. I'll kind of walk through that in this demo here, because I'm actually using Visual Studio 2015 to kind of build the app. I'll kind of walk through that. And like I said, you basically can use the one tool. So actually, who here just primarily uses Visual Studio? It's not curiosity. Okay. So the nice thing about this is that comfort. So usually when you come talking something new, you don't want to kind of fight with the tools. So the nice thing here is I can kind of jump into this with some understanding of my tool, in this case Visual Studio. And it's just a matter of just kind of installing the Xamarin bits and creating the project. So the nice thing there is you have that comfort coming into this. And like I said, if you are pretty proficient at C#, it'll all feel familiar to you. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I kind of gravitated to this. Not in this talk, but the one thing I should point out is I do have a talk on Xamarin.Forms. So I'll talk about that quickly. So Xamarin.Forms is their abstraction of basically creating the one UI across all the mobile platforms. So I could use their version of XAML to basically define my UI. And how it works is when I compile the apps to each of the platforms for iOS and Android, it understands when I say list box in my XAML, it knows, okay, well, you mean the list box for Apple or the list box for Android. So the nice thing about that is you can quickly rev up a quick prototype using that tool. I wouldn't recommend it for anything that's UI rich, I guess is the term I'm trying to get to. Because the danger is you'll get into a lot of doing what they call custom renders. So basically it's you intercepting how they draw the UI in each of the platforms. So if you get into that situation where you're doing a lot of custom rendering, you're kind of tackling it the wrong way. So if you encounter that, then you definitely want to write native, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, is doing the native side on the iOS. Okay, so this is Visual Studio. So basically what we've got is if you bring up the new project, you basically have all these really interesting projects now inside Visual Studio. So it's not just .NET. I now have Android, iOS in there in the mix as well. And it took me a while to kind of, it's like, whoa, where did that come from? It's all new Microsoft now, it's all friendly. So here we've got the iPhone project. So for this demo, I've actually used the blank app template to kind of create this app. The nice thing about this is, like I said, the templates are pretty straightforward. You can kind of click on them, run them, to kind of get a feel for the structure of the mobile platform. The nice thing about this, and again using Visual Studio, is once I've got the integration with my Mac side, basically I can run it inside the iPhone simulator on the Mac side. So what that allows me to do is basically I've got my Visual Studio hooked up to the Mac side, I can actually set breakpoints in my code. So as I'm walking through my app on the iPhone simulator, I can hit my breakpoints. And that to me is a very cool thing, because it's like I'm on the Mac, playing on the Mac, but I'm on my Windows box running this program. How cool is that? Kind of hit the breakpoints. I will say that if you do the Android side, I'll just kind of drop this. So you've got two new options there. Microsoft has baked in Android emulators into this, into Visual Studio. So if you've done any kind of Android development, you may understand the pain points of using the native Android simulator. The nice thing is it's now baked inside Visual Studio, and the good thing is it does support Hyper-V. Okay, so you don't have to play around with turning that on and off. The nice thing about this too is I can also select the iPhone simulator to basically send the application and deploy it onto the Mac side. Yeah, so this is talking about Xamarin Studio. What can I say there? I do notice, and this is something that I've experienced, is there's a bit of, so if I'm using Visual Studio, basically what I've got is I'm using the Xamarin plugin there. So if I bring up the design zone, I know there's a bit of loading up time there on the initial load inside Visual Studio. Xamarin Studio doesn't necessarily have that. I tend to favor this when I'm building Xamarin.Forms applications because of the IntelliSense on their flavor of XAML. You have to remember, if you've done any kind of WPF, Silverlight, or Windows Phone, they have their own flavor of XAML. Well, XAML.Forms, it has its own flavor, so that the properties don't necessarily match up with what Microsoft has on it. So I find I'm using this Xamarin Studio to kind of do that development because it understands the syntax. Question to that.
There's actually a third-party XML, I think it's XML, that actually gives you the IntelliSense for the forms in Visual Studio.
I tend to shy away from that because I don't want to be dependent on those. I know ReSharper
does work.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And ReSharper does as well. It's just, there's nothing wrong with it. Just for my development purpose, I try to not put too much inside Visual Studio because I find it's right now, it's a little bit sluggish right now, so I don't want to kind of add to the mix right now. Hopefully, Microsoft kind of addresses that and kind of makes it a little bit more lighter and leaner. But no, yes, I know what you're talking about. All right, so this is kind of looking at the, so like I said, you've got the Apple concepts of the design. So basically the idea of a storyboard. In this case, they're showing the views, and you've got a navigation control view there at the beginning. So it's kind of walking through this. That there blows me away. That what just happened there. So the demo, the person double-clicked on the button, and immediately what happened there is it went into the handler for the button. If you've done any kind of Xcoding development on the Mac, it doesn't do that. You have to actually kind of wire that yourself. So there are some niceties I kind of use in this because you have that I guess that Microsoft way of kind of doing development. So if you're used to that, they kind of brought that inside the Android and Mac development, which I really love. Okay, so these are some of the iOS settings that you have, so you can kind of control basically what devices you target, the SDK, the deployment target, basically how the app executes. You want landscape, portrait, so you can kind of control that. So again, if you're familiar with Visual Studio, this is all going to look kind of familiar to you. You have your options to kind of control your build options. I should take a side pause here. So one of the pain points that I had doing the demo this recently is I upgraded my Xcode on my Mac side. I thought I was being pretty cool. This was a month back. So it was the night before a demo doing the same talk. So I upgraded to Xcode because the Mac was screaming at me, saying, hey, there's an update. And I'm thinking, what could go wrong? You know, the night before demo, no problems. You know, I'll rock this. Totally. So I pull up my demo code that night. Wouldn't compile. Well, that's very interesting. What had happened is Apple had released a update that night before Xamarin had released their update. So what they had was they had a beta release that same night. So I had to bring in that beta bit to basically work with the Xcode. I believe it was 7, and it supported 9.1 iOS. So well, that's very interesting. So I set all up, got it working, you know, demo, rocked the demo, no problems, you know, problem avoided. There's a new thing, and I'll talk about that as we get into the demo bit, because there was another pain point that I had. So what had happened after that is a couple days later, Xamarin released the stable build. So I was able to kind of flip from beta to stable. And that right there in itself is actually really great because I can kind of just flip a switch, go from beta to stable, and I'm good. I kind of wish that Microsoft would kind of do that with Visual Studio. It'd be nice, like, you know how they do it for Windows 10, where they have different rings? It'd be kind of nice if I could do the same thing with Visual Studio. It's like, you know what? I'll let someone else do the beta bits for my my dev box for my client stuff. I want to be unstable. I'll let other people kind of deal with that, because that's the one gotcha I'm gonna have to point out is if you have a demo for a client, don't update. Don't. Because this will bite you. Because again, there's they don't necessarily release the same day as Apple, so just bear that in mind. But that's really that's with any kind of development. You just have to keep that in mind. So if you're going to use beta bits, be prepared for it to kind of bite you a bit. So this is the other thing. So everyone knows about NuGet and how wonderful that is, and you can go in and you can shop around. So basically, for the people that don't know what that is, so inside Visual Studio, I can go into what they call the NuGet Package Manager. So it's kind of like an online store of code bits, little apps that I can kind of bring inside my application, kind of deal with either a certain problem, either dealing with images or database stuff. The component store is the same kind of concept. However, this is more curated. So Xamarin is actually actively going in and making sure that all this stuff actually works and has proper documentation. So I've used this quite a bit for this demo. I'll kind of talk a bit about that. What I find with this is it's like you've got NuGet and then you've got component store. It's like night and day. I can go into the store and basically pull up any kind of API, and it has full documentation. The nice thing about it is I can click a button and it'll actually insert that code right in where I have my focus, my cursor focus inside my code. The other thing is it's got full demo apps on a lot of the APIs. So I can actually literally bring down a full application to kind of see how to leverage that API. And I don't know about you, but it's really nice to be able to kind of say, well, how am I going to use this API? Because a lot of times you bring stuff from NuGet and it's like, all right, you're on your own. You got to figure out how to kind of hook it up and how to set it up. With this, I find a lot of documentation. You got sample apps. So you've got all this self-help there, which is really great. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about iOS application lifecycle structure here. This is going to be kind of a quick run through. So basically, for the foreground, we've got different states. We've got an inactive state and an active state. So what you've got is you have the ability to kind of intercept those states or determine those. We have overrides for that. For the background state, you've got another state, background. And of course, the not running state. So all these are the different states that an application kind of goes through. So the important bit is basically kind of getting at all that. So basically you've got overrides, and this is where we're getting into, this is the important bit, it's like, okay, how do I determine what the state of the application is at? So it's not running, so these are the different states, so basically, you know, on loaded event that you're familiar with. So for not running, from going active, is it on active? Inactive, unresigned. Background, did it enter in background? If it goes from background to active, will it in the foreground? Suspended will terminate. So the other thing we have here is we got the different views. So in this case, we have the UI view controller here. Talk a little bit about the storyboards. The one thing I didn't mention on the storyboards is they have a concept called segues. So basically it's how I navigate from one view to the next. And that's what this guy is here. He represents the segue. And all that basically produces so the view basically, I'll get to the next slide here, but the pattern they're using here is MVC. So if you're familiar with that pattern, that's what Apple uses for most of their functionality to control their navigation. So you've got basically the controller controlling the views, which is the storyboard to produce your app. The app delegate is basically the bootloader. So all my bits, so if you've done any kind of Windows Phone development, the one I can compare it to is the app.cs or the app.zim. And of course, we talked about this, the view controller. So you've got the controller, you've got your model. You've got the view, which is the UI view inside Apple. You see changes. All right, demo. Right, so I'll stop and kind of give you guys a bit of kind of pause. Is there any questions before I kind of get into the demo? You're so overwhelmed.
Just had a question about
Yeah.
the emulator. Did you say there's no iPhone emulator from Visual Studio? It has to run on the Mac?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, that's Apple's. Sorry, you must buy an Apple device.
Right. But even for the emulator, like I know you have to compile it on the
Yeah.
Mac, but there's no emulator that runs from Visual Studio.
I would think that there might be some legality issues there. Question back there.
When you're compiling an app, do you have to use an emulator or can you put it straight to a phone?
You can do it straight to the phone. Okay. The device I use quite a bit because I can't. I've got several devices yet, and I'm waiting for someone to give me an iPhone, but I'll have to wait on that. So I'm using the iPhone. On my laptop. Basically, I'm using the iPhone iPad, your iTouch.
iPad
iPad Touch, thank you. Yep. Sorry, iTouch, I think it's called. So basically, that's what I'm using right there. So that's, it's $150. You can probably get it on sale. So that's the device I use. So at least have something where I can kind of do some simulations and do some touch and all that.
Can you debug while you're running it on the
Yes.
phone?
Tom,
Go ahead.
using Xamarin Studio, can I push it straight through that to that iPad touch?
Yeah, so basically what happens is you basically have it set up, you have it inside the drop-down menu. So what happens is the Visual Studio will talk to the build server, do the compiling, and then send it up to the device. That's what happens there.
Are there situations where you need to know iOS APIs or Object-C or Swift?
It doesn't hurt. It's like anything else. Like you're going to have to get into it to basically understand some of the. Basically, what it is you have to understand their terminology for how they identify objects, and it's kind of making that translation. So that's the big, hurdle to kind of overcome. With using this stuff here, is what's happening is if I got Visual Studio, I've got Xamarin. I'm leveraging my C# skills. So what it is, what I'm doing is I'm reducing the amount of barriers that I have to basically overcome to basically deploy my apps in either iOS or Android. So basically I'm kind of reducing the amount of work that I have to do to kind of learn all these new tools and everything. That's what I'm really kind of gaining. But you're still going to have to go in and understand some of the terminology. Basically, I did a kind of like a really quick review of the life cycle. So the life cycle is going to be a little bit different. The way they approach some of the overrides. One example is when view appears or does appear, those don't get activated when you hit home. They only get activated when you're navigating from form to form. So it's things like that you wouldn't necessarily pick up coming from a Windows Phone kind of development mindset to an iOS mindset. There's going to be some subtle differences there. But I think that's natural when you're learning something new, especially on a different platform. All right, so let's exit out of this. So I should talk about my development environment so you guys can get a sense of what's going on. So this is Windows 10. Yes, it's running on my Mac. So what I'm using is a product called Parallels Desktop, which is on the screen there. So what that does, it allows me to create a virtual Windows 10 desktop, basically do my development. This is pretty good because I can kind of pin my Microsoft products to the iOS, or sorry, the Apple dock. So if I go back, or I bring that, so I can actually dock some of my Microsoft products. So in this case, I've docked Visual Studio there. I will say that this does put a bit of a hit on your Mac, because it will run a little harder, so keep that in mind. It will run slow. I'm running a MacBook Air. It's not exactly high-end computer for this work, but for doing demos, it works beautifully. So basically, for Parallels, I believe that's the Pro license costs about $70. There's other products out in the market right now. There's VMware as well. That they kind of go like this back and forth. I think at this point they're kind of, as far as feature-wise, they're pretty good. The other thing I could probably mention too is it's pretty seamless, so I can kind of cut and paste between the two environments, relatively easy. So if I have something in the Mac side, I can kind of copy and paste it into the Windows side, so that's kind of nice. I talked about this before. So this here is the build server. So what I've got here is I've installed Xamarin on the Mac side. This here is what they call the build host. So what it is just a server component that's running in the background of my Mac, basically intercepting the calls from my Visual Studio running right here. So if I go into that, so basically what I've got is if I go into options, you have a new option here, way at the bottom called Xamarin. So if I click on iOS settings here, so right now I've got these two things paired. They're actually improving this now, so you don't necessarily have to do this step anymore. The problem they have with this, you may not encounter it, but if you want to automate your builds, as you probably should, because you want to do the unit testing, all that, this requires a visual UI to be on your build box. Okay, so I literally have to install Visual Studio, do the pairing between my Mac on the network. Okay. Problem is, if this, times out, resets, I lose that connection between Visual Studio and the host, the Xamarin host, which could be a bad thing if you're trying to schedule your stuff late at night because you want to save yourself time. Come in the morning, how did my test go? How did the build go? So if you're doing multiple apps, which some shops are doing, they're creating multiple mobile apps, you don't want to kind of have that. So what they've done is they've actually kind of pulled that out, so you don't necessarily have to have Visual Studio with the build host. So you can have the compilers kind of in the background, kind of executing this stuff. So you don't have to have this UI, which is good because you don't want to have that dependency there. So basically, in a nutshell, is I'm not required to install the full-blown Visual Studio on my build box. question.
Would that be the Apple version of Visual Studio that you need to install?
Nope. No, it's basically I would be calling the MS build and basically sending it to the Xamarin host.
Right, okay.
For
You
Android,
still have to have some kind of connection there.
Yep.
But, you know, I can do a PowerShell script or whatever scripting I need to kind of send those commands. Basically what they've done is they've kind of pulled that dependency out from the UI. So basically how this works is it knows it's looking for that build host there. So basically it knows, I click on that. The one thing that I didn't show you is if I unpair that, what it does is it gives you a code that you would have to enter in to pair up your Visual Studio with the build host. Okay, so let's go back to Visual Studio. Close this.
Is that, sorry, for asking, build host, is that an Apple product or is that a Xamarin product?
That's a Xamarin product.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah. So basically what it's doing is it's talking to the,
It's sitting between Xcode and the network
Right.
where you
Yeah.
then come.
yeah, it's intercepting the calls. Say, okay, I've got a program coming your way.
Right.
You deal with it. You compile it.
Okay.
That's that ahead of time compiling on the Mac side. All right. So I've talked about the build host. So this is Visual Studio. Let's just kind of jump into the storyboard. So what's going on here is I've got the Xamarin plugin here kind of running. This is kind of what I talked about before. You get a little bit of there's a problem rendering the objects. Okay. Worried about that? Let's just close this. Always have a backup. That is part of one of the issues that I had with the demo. Because I had to basically update Xamarin to kind of understand the new Xcode. One of the issues is I get that error, which is I can't read your storyboards, because what's happening is it's actually talking to the Mac side to kind of do those renderings on the storyboard. So I'm hoping what that means is I just pulled up the wrong version of this app. And that's my bad, because I've got several different versions of this. I'm kind of going back and forth, so after this demo, I'll get that fixed. Okay, let's get into that again. Cross my fingers for the best. So it does take a bit on the initial load. The other thing that I should probably point out is you've got basically the toolbox here of all your controls. There we go. So what happened there is the other version of this had the beta bits of Xamarin. This one's got the stable bits. As you see, it's got the screens up there. So let's kind of zoom out on this. So you can kind of take a look at this. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. So what's going on is I've basically got 2 pages for this application, okay? The navigation controller is not a visible element. It's basically controlling the navigation stack for the app. It's the guy controlling the flow of how it's navigating from one page to the next. So basically what happens is I'm basically telling it, this is the root view, pop it into the navigation stack. So if you're a Windows Phone developer, you might understand the frame object. And that's what this guy's doing. He's kind of controlling the navigation from my app. So what I've done is I created a segue into this view. So that's the view I got. So basically I've defined that as the root object. So that's the starting view. And then how this is working, the segue from this to this, this is basically a collection list view that I'm using here. So these represent individual objects here. So if I click on one of these objects, this segue, I'm intercepting that segue, so basically I'm overriding it, saying, okay, I want to override that segue because I want to do some work. So basically what I'm doing is I'm passing data through that override. So basically in this case what's happening here, and I'll go through the application kind of give you an idea of what's going on here. So basically this is doing a Bing search. Yes, I'm using Bing with a Mac. Just to kind of throw everyone in the loop there. So basically what's happening is I'm doing a Bing search for images. So this is producing a list of 50 images. I click on one of the images. It copies that into a properties. I override the segue. Here I've got a property to kind of hold that image. So I kind of just, into the segue override, I pass that image into the properties that's publicly available here. So what's happening here in this page, this view, is the image comes up here. I'm using the built-in iOS Twitter API. That's the nice thing about the iOS. I've got a lot of stuff baked into the platform, which is really nice. So I'm leveraging that. So what happens is it brings up the dialogue for Twitter. So I'll kind of run through that. The other gadget that I should point out, so if you look at the top where I've got the iPhone simulator set up, by default, I don't know why it does this, but by default it does that. Okay? Don't know why. I should actually set it to iPhone simulator. What happens if I run it this way? It'll come back with this really cryptic error. It basically says, can't deploy application because there's no certified certificate to do the actual deploy. Okay, so for Mac stuff, you need certs to kind of deploy to your devices. So that's what's going on there. So I'll run it.
Will you connect your iPhone to your Windows phone?
You have to register your phone though with your Apple account. That's what it's asking for. You need that cert.
Right, but if that happened, how would you? Can you push Visual Studio running on your Windows box to the iPhone directly through a USB cable, or?
Well, basically you'd have to enter in your cert. In this case, we talked about it before. So basically, what happens is it goes, okay, you're going to an iPhone. I see the device, so it goes into the Xamarin build host, does the compiling, and says, oh, you're going to a attached phone, so it goes out to the phone.
But the question, I mean, let's say we have two different hardware devices, one where you build host, so it's a Mac Mini, let's say, and here you have your Windows laptop.
Yeah.
To which one of those two computers do I connect my iPhone?
The Windows side.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll run this quickly to kind of show you the error. Yeah. I'll say no. Let's go into the output here. Show the error. Basically, what should happen is it should be showing basically the signature is not available. So basically, to kind of get around that, if you don't have a phone to register with your account, you basically select iPhone simulator and make sure it's set to debug, and that will kind of avoid that problem. So in this case, I'm going to select iPhone 6, iOS 9.1. And those errors. I'll rebuild that just in case. It's saying it's failed, but why is it failed? All right.
Do you have the configuration that you set to deploy?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so one of the things that Lori just mentioned, yeah.
Oh, you don't have to select it?
Should be there.
Okay.
Should be there. So I'm gonna close this guy down. Sometimes what happens is okay. All right, so this might be part of the problem is because I opened up another Visual Studio. So the build host is actually attached to that other instance. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of close this down, go back into my build host on the Mac side, gonna unpair that. I know that demo works. Confident in that. I tried it before coming here. So the nice thing, like I said, you've got the storyboards, you've got the tool set. So you saw, kind of quickly went into that quickly. So in the toolbox, I've got all the iOS controls. I can kind of drag those into my views. I didn't talk about it, but I'm using the collection list, which is like the souped up long list selector you can see on Windows Phone. With that one on the iOS side, basically the collection list, I can basically have collections of different objects. So you can get pretty creative with that list. So it's not a list of just the same things. You can actually have a list of different things on there. Okay, so he wants to pair up. So I'm gonna say pair, and it's gonna give me this wonderful code. I'm gonna take that. This is what always kind of trips me up too, is when I'm going from one environment to the other. It's trying to remember the copy paste.
No.
Keyboard command, yeah. That always gets me. But because I'm running the parallels, I can use the Mac, and it understands that on the Windows side. So just another selling point for parallels. Okay, so there we go. Let's just compile this to kind of make sure this is working. So we can go through the application structure a bit here. So I talked about the app delegate. That's kind of the bootloader there. So what I've got here is I've got basically two views or two pages. So that's my root view, which is the one with all the list of stuff, and that's doing the search. I've got my second view, which is the Twitter piece. Yeah. Okay. So I didn't come back and complain. I'm just going to check the output here. Okay, so let's see it. So this is one of those quirks where it didn't necessarily tell me what the issue was, but if you're loading up a lot of different Visual Studios and you get that kind of oddity, it's usually because the build host is hooked up to the one that you're probably not using currently. So keep that in mind.
There is a version coming where they've changed the build host.
Yes.
So that you can have multiple instances of Visual Studio.
Yeah. So that's the good thing about Xamarin, is they're aware of all these pain points, and they're really, considering that they're such a small team, they're really good at cranking out all the updates. Okay, so quickly here, I'm using Bing here. I'm just going to take the default here. And we've got pictures of tamarin monkeys. So let's click on one of these guys. Okay, so I talked about basically I'm doing the override from the segue, getting that image, copying it over to this page here. Let's do a quick tweet. So this is the built-in dialog. I didn't have to create any of this. This is kind of built into the iOS platform. And of course, the other thing too is you need to set up a valid Twitter account inside the simulator for that to work.
So if I go into my settings, I have to set that up too. So that's how this is kind of, it's reading that configuration. Okay, so what should happen? That should have gone out. That was the earlier one. Okay, it does take a while for the image to load inside the Twitter app, so I know it went. Trust me on that. Boom, there it is. So hey, great. Worked. Awesome. So let's talk about that, and how much time do I have? Am I running a little late here?
Yeah, well, maybe we should take a break.
Okay. Take a break and I'll walk through the code and that'll be a wrap. I'll be quick here. So basically what I've created is I've got my iOS client here. Below I've created a shared library to kind of contain my logic here. So I mentioned before what I'm using is I'm using Bing search to kind of do some of that work for me. So you can actually register on the Azure Data Center to basically access this API. You can get the free version, which is kind of nice. I believe it allows for 1 million transactions, which is like insane. Nice thing about this is I can kind of control what I hit because there's an adult or a filter there that I can kind of say, please no bad stuff on my searches. So it's kind of one of the reasons why I use it. So basically what I do here is you have to basically register as a developer, get the key, and you basically put it into those bits there. This code will be available. It's actually on my GitHub. I'll put the links on the meetup here for this. And then what I've got here is basically these are the models. So this basically I'm using JSON to kind of package all this up. So those represent the results coming back from that. And basically I'm kind of leveraging that inside my root controller here. So this is that main view that I mentioned before. So basically what's going on here is actually using that to basically be the data source for that collection that I've got here. That's what's going on here. So basically I love how they name their click event. So it's not a click event, it's like a touch up inside. So that's a click event. So when I tap on the image, what's happening here is I'm basically intercepting that and patching up the results there. Sorry, no, that's the search button. Excuse me, no. That's the search results. So basically getting the data out of that.
Does that have to do with that new deep touch thing that they have now?
The 3D touch? No, it does
3D
not.
touch.
I
I think the naming convention, right? Touch up, and then you have like within that thing you could have now different types of
yeah, so it's like
touch
top,
events.
like touch and hold kind of thing.
Yeah.
If I have a 3D touch. That's a good point. Yeah, that could be why they kind of went that way with the naming. So I'll try to be wrapping up real quick here. So basically, make the call. So this is where basically I'm packaging up. So basically I'm intercepting the segue from my root view to the Twitter page. So basically I'm overriding that and basically pulling out the image on that. And basically, so what I'm doing is basically I'm getting a reference to that view controller and basically packaging up the image into the property of the image. And that's what you're seeing on the other page, that second view page. What else? So here, this is me taking advantage of the component store. So this function call here is actually a component that I used from the Xamarin component store. And what that does a lot of work for me. So to work with some of the images, I actually have to download the image into the device to be able to use it on the iOS side. So what that does, it does all that work for me. So all I have to do is just basically call that function, and that's actually a function you can get out of the component store. So that's where I'm kind of leveraging that component store. Question in the back.
So, is that the recommended way of passing that item? So you're passing through the segue.
Yeah.
And you're passing essentially a reference to an image.
Yeah.
Now, is that the recommended way of doing it in iOS? Would you also use something like an observable collection and just have the selected item? And you have the observable collection viewable as a singleton, let's say.
Yeah. To answer your question, is the observable collection is probably the better approach.
Okay.
Here, I wanted to keep things simple for people to kind of, okay, I see what you're doing there, okay. I didn't want to get too complex. The other thing too is iOS has their own data types. We have the int, so it's a 64 integer there going in there. What else can I talk about? That's about it. Question about?
Sorry, one question. iOS doesn't have namespaces. Is that a bit of a challenge working in a language that is natively using namespaces, or is just it's kind of a non-issue?
You get used to it after a while. To kind of navigate into it. That was kind of one of the challenges that I had, was just kind of understanding their conventions that they use on the Apple side. The nice thing about it is I can read the documentation, and Xamarin's pretty good at one-to-one mapping of the APIs, so that's a good thing. So I can read the Apple docs and it goes, oh, okay, so that's coming out of this. So I'll have to use the same reference to the same name on the C# end of it here. So, last but not least, this is the Twitter page. So basically, I'm taking advantage of the built-in Twitter functionality on iOS. So that's what's bringing up the dialog box there. I didn't have to create that; it's already built in. I'm just kind of leveraging that inside my app, and that's pretty much the magic of this app. It doesn't do a whole lot, but I figured for this demo, it's a good starting point. Like I said, I'll share this with you guys on my GitHub, so you can kind of take a look at it and kind of pull it apart. The only thing you're gonna have to do is register with the Bing data center to basically get yourself a key to kind of leverage the Bing API. You don't necessarily have to use this one. There's other APIs in there as well. A lot of them are free. So definitely take a look at the data mart, the Azure data mart. I'm not sure why they don't advertise it enough. Maybe it's not gonna, maybe it's just not making money. I don't know. Anyway, so that is a wrap for the talk. I'm gonna leave it back to you guys for questions. If there's no questions, I think that's a wrap. And I'll let it back to Laura to kind of do the prizes. I'm taking the lead thing though. It's mine. No?
No.